What's a story your friend told which you initially thought was bulls, but turned out to be true? My great-granddad was in the British Navy in World War II. A bomb dropped by the Germans landed on their ship but didn't detonate, so my granddad and his friend ran towards it and hurled it off the ship where it exploded underwater. They figured that they were going to die anyway if it exploded, so why not try and save as many as possible in the process. This story went on for years and years and nobody quite believed him. They would all laugh and thought it was just a war hero's exaggerated tale. Until one day he pulled out his war medals and a letter from his captain stating what he had done for the men on that ship that day. Nobody second guessed his stories ever again. I miss him a lot. What a freaking legend. Also, you mostly doubted him because it was a story of German engineering failing, which is absurd, I'm sure. At a party in 2008 or 2009, a random guy who apparently had a cousin who worked in Hollywood told me he knew a lot of celebrity secrets. I didn't really believe him and asked, like what, and he told me Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes' marriage was a sham, and they had a contract to stay married for 5 years. I thought it was total balls and he just wanted attention at the party. But then they divorced after 5.5 years and reached an agreement only a few days after filing. I wondered if there was something to what he said. In 9th grade, during the middle of our teenage angst, a friend in our clique was bragging about banging this pretty hot chick. No one believed him until we all found out she had gotten pregnant. Won the battle, lost the war. My best friend in college was a non-traditional, way older, student who said she used to be an onstage go-go dancer for Rob Zombie. She's super nice and has a lot of stories like this. Working in a strip club in LA and being paid to pee on a young John Turturro. Working as Sasha Mitchell's nanny and talking to police during the domestic charges. I didn't believe most of the stories until we were hanging out one night and Rob Zombie walked in the side door without knocking holding a gift. An old Super Nintendo he found at a garage sale. Someone has a story about Rob Zombie buying their Super Nintendo. Back in elementary school, chubby friend told our group that he could do a backflip on his trampoline. Of course no one believed him as he was one of the most unathletic dudes in the school, or so it seemed. We went to his house after school and let MF hit 6 in a row before jumping off the trampoline and spraining his ankle. He went from 0 to 100 to 0 real quick. Under his high school picture in the yearbook it says one time was almost cool. When we first met in high school, my husband told me that he slept in a closet under the stairs in his basement. Thought he was just exaggerating until we went over and saw his bedroom complete with his name on the closet door. I went to college in a city called Galway in the west of Ireland. One of my friends there was a native of the city. He often told me this story about a local character called Johnny Moocheyman, who was stumbling home from the pub late one night and he spotted a circus set up on the side of the road. So he hops over the wall and decides to go in for a look. He wanders over to the cage where the tigers are kept and sticks his hand through the gap wanting to pet them. The tigers immediately bit both of the man's arms off. Well, I didn't believe this story for any number of reasons. His ridiculous name, Johnny Moocheyman, the fact that the tigers managed to bite his arms off in one go, the fact that the man had survived, the fact that circuses apparently still exist in this day and age, none of it remotely plausible. Couple of years later, I had just started working in a late night petrol station convenience store. Late one night, a drunk comes up to the locked front door trying to get in. I point him around to the hatch I'm serving through, but the security guard unlocks the door and lets him in. He tells me this is Johnny. He and the store manager are the only two people you're allowed open the front door for. This seemed odd to me, cause he looked like a random tramp off the street. That's when I realized the guy's sleeves were dangling. He had no arms. That night, and many other to follow that summer, I had to sell cigarettes to Johnny Moocheyman. This involved taking money out of his trouser pocket and replacing the change. It also involved opening the cigarette pack, putting a cigarette in his mouth, lighting a match and then putting the cigarette box and matches in his jacket pocket. Postscript. A few weeks later I met a friend of mine who worked as a barman in the city. We got to talking about Johnny Moocheyman. Apparently, he drank a lot in the bar my friend was working in. All day in the bar drinking pints of Guinness through a straw. I was giving out, telling my friend how much I dreaded putting my hand into the Johnny Moocheyman's disgusting trousers. My friend snorted, looked at the ground and said Ian, what do you think happens when he has to go for a pee? I'm from Galway and I believe he got his first arm bitten off and then his second trying to retrieve it. You can't make this stuff up, haha. My college housemate came out of his bedroom looking like he had been through the ringer early one morning after we moved into a new place. He told me he had sleepwalked, woke up to a gun in his face at 3 AM, ran the wrong direction, and ended up almost at Walmart, 2.6 miles according to Google Maps, before a guy came out of his house who called his police officer brother-in-law. The police officer drove his home. Didn't believe he had made it that far, but I drove to Walmart later and saw a house that was the exact description my roommate had given me. Then throughout the day both the cop and the homeowner came to check on him. He has a history with sleepwalking but not 2 miles. Sounds like Ambien. He claimed that Bluetooth technology was named after a 10th century king, King Harald Bluetooth Gormson. The king united Denmark and Norway, just like the wireless technology united computers and cell phones. And the Bluetooth symbol we all see on our phones or whatever is his initials, HB, in younger Futhok runes. Had a friend that lied about pretty much everything. Talked about how he modded his PS1 to make Lara Croft naked. He claimed to have ollied 7 stairs on a skateboard while wearing boots when he was a freshman in high school. Bragged about a bunch of girls he made out with that were just absolutely out of his league. We were the awkward Star Wars nerds and he was talking about cheerleaders. This was like the late 90s when our obsession with those movies absolutely not in fashion. He told us he had a working Simpsons arcade cabinet in his garage. Said he had family members in the mafia because he had an Italian last name and was from Jersey. One day he invites us over to his house to hang out for the afternoon. Cranks up the PS1 and I'm like, let's see some Lara Croft titties, sir. He says that's another PlayStation that his cousin was borrowing or something. I figured, frick if I can now call him out on some real bulls he was spouting. Asked him to see the Simpsons arcade cabinet and he took us to the garage and that mother had a working Simpsons arcade cabinet in his garage. One of my friends always liked to exaggerate. He once told me he just made like $10k from a penny stock. I brushed it off as bulls until the next day he shows up with a used boat. We lived close to a few lakes so that was a fun summer. Got the best kind of boat too, a buddies. That his dad had 40 guitars. This is when I was in high school and everyone was scrounging up money to start a band. Called Bulls. Went over to his house after school and holy frick. And that's how I ended up playing bass in a crappy high school band. The drummer knew every Korn song but not much else. The guitarist knew Hotel California but not much else. And I knew the bass line from the Cake version of I Will Survive. Yeah, this did not last past summer. Upvoted for Cake. That he was recruited to play football at Notre Dame. He was from a very small area. I called BS and was proven wrong. After looking into it, he held a lot of offers, just didn't have the grades. Had a friend tell me he was going to Cedar Point for a weekend, ended up being gone for a few months. When he gets back he casual tells me he was ran over by a semi at the camping grounds they were staying at. My mom swore up and down that she did coke, partied with Aerosmith regularly. For years and years she told me the stories about being a groupie and I just didn't buy it. Don't know why, because she lived in the valley and was a major partier. One day we see Joe Perry at the Ritz in LA. He freaking remembered her as soon as she said her name. I'm still not over it. I worked in a lawyer's office when I finished school, 20 or so years ago now. Really bonded with this one guy who was as low in the pecking order as I was. I think he was some kind of office supply person, whereas I was just the girl that opened the mail. We'd go to the pub for lunch every day, get a nice little buzz going and just talk about random stuff. Except he would always change the subject when I asked about his life before the office. He was a smart guy, really sharp and funny, and I always wanted to know how he ended up ordering post-it notes for a small-time firm of solicitors in Middle England. One lunchtime, he had a couple more beers than usual and started to tell me this story about how he hadn't always been known by the name he was using. That in actual fact he was on the run because his dad was a big-time recreational drug manufacturer and he used to work for him as a dealer. And that one day a few years before I met him they had been raided by the police. His dad went to prison for a while. and they didn't catch my friend because he had long, flowing hair at the time and the team that had them under surveillance thought he was a girl. I laughed it off. Figured he was just saying it to impress me or something. Didn't mention it again. A couple of weeks later, we're at his place. He puts the TV on, grabs a VHS tape off the shelf and tells me to watch. It's a recording of a report from the national news about his dad, and they show a bit of the surveillance footage of the mysterious girl who is 100% unmistakably actually my guy from work. All he did was cut his hair and get a job with a load of criminal lawyers. Talk about hiding in plain sight. If this is legit, I hope this post doesn't blow his cover somehow. Two of my friends shared a story about the times that both got drunk and joined the Communist Party of Wales and Communist Party of Croatia respectively. I thought they were both trolling me until they showed me the proof. I both want to and never want to go out drinking with them again. Kid in grade 4 said he had all 3 Egyptian god cards from Yu-Gi-Oh! Thought he was lying until he brought them to school one day. From that day on he became a legend. That his friend rolled a blunt full of hair and smoked it for $20. There was video for proof that I eventually saw and it was disgusting. He's a tattooed metalhead who claimed that he grew up on a hippie commune in northern Cali with Timothy Leary and Winona Ryder. I called bulls. One day at work I was called to the floor. Thought it was a potential interviewee but it was just Winona who called me out for calling bulls on mic. It was one of the most embarrassing and amazing moments of my life. Still less embarrassing than being caught shoplifting as a millionaire actress. I had a high school college friend who was normally a good AF dude but had anger problems when he drank. Call him Julius. His GF cheated on him and left him for one of his other really close friends. Call him Mark. A couple weeks later, Julius was at a party. He got drunk and wandered off. Mark's car was parked a few blocks away from that party and was found vandalized and broken into. Julius swears up and down he didn't do it. I said I believed him but was really skeptical. Just seemed like something he'd do when drunk and it was a lot of coincidence. Police talked to him a couple of times and Julius is in the process of lawyering up. Next weekend comes and there are several more vandalized burglared cars in the same neighborhood and they caught the guy on video doing it. Definitely not Julius. I honestly couldn't believe he didn't do it, but he was telling the truth. My friend in high school said she was on a Smashing Pumpkins album cover when she was little. I didn't believe her, but she was a dead ringer for the girl on the left, wearing wings, on the cover of Siamese Dream. So I figured she just said that to be cool because things were infinitely harder to disprove before we had Google. Met her parents later, they confirmed it. I worked with a guy who had insane stories about his super hot boyfriend, his rich uncle who lived in Texas, and his frequent trips to go see his favorite football team. I always kinda indulged the guy. I figured we worked at a crappy chain grocery store cashiering and he had nothing better to do at work than fantasize about a better life. Until he came in off shift with said super hot boyfriend and showed me selfies they took from the pro football game they'd gone to a week earlier. Dude was really living his best life. I had a client who claimed to be the boy toy of a very prominent lawyer in my town. I thought I was just humoring him until he came in with the lawyer's credit card. That his uncle worked for big tech company and had access to all the latest tech. Thought he was bullying until I went around his house and his uncle was there showing off the latest console months before it was due to hit the market. A man I met told me he works with rockets. Thought he was just lying and trying to impress catfish me. Turns out, he's an aerospace engineer at NASA and is now my fiance. One time some friends and I were in the cinema. Well, one of my friends went to the bathroom and when he came back, he told us that super hot girls just asked him for his Instagram. We, not being the best looking group of guys, did not believe him. Well, after the movie ended and we went for some food, he got 3 girls asking to follow him on Instagram. Since that day he thinks he is a model. Super hot girls just asked him, go on, for his Instagram. Oh. 9/11, a co-worker told me a plane just hit the World Trade Center. I said no way. He said he just heard it on the radio. I still didn't believe it. They turned on the TV and I saw the building burning and the second plane hit. Before that I thought it was too crazy. Sad day. This was my experience, only I was in high school and we were giving rides that day. The annoying always bullshitting kid showed up and said there was a big terrorist attack and we did not believe him. I got to school and it was all anyone was talking about. I went through a breakup one time and kinda went crazy. I took all my money out of the bank, bought enough supplies to last me a good while, and disappeared into the mountains of Georgia. When sophomore year of college came around, I changed from a psych major to a biology major because I had lived out there for 2 months. No one believed me until my dad was visiting my dorm and thanked me for all the deer meat I had given him when I came back. I was working at Starbucks in Los Angeles and was in the back room doing dishes. It was about 15 minutes before close. My friend and co-worker pokes her head around the corner and says, "Can you come ring up Han Solo?" I closed my register already. I didn't know what she meant until I walk out front and see Harrison Ford standing in front of my register. I was a huge Star Wars nerd at the time. My brother once claimed his friend was one of Sum 41's band members' cousins. I didn't believe him until I happened to catch an interview with another one of the band members' sisters on MTV whom I recognized as one of our neighbors. Turns out they used to practice in a garage across the street from us. My boyfriend was half Chinese and told me his Chinese grandparents kept entirely black chickens with black flesh. I showed him Stardew Valley and it reminded him of it, and I thought no, surely not. But I researched it and yes, entirely black mother cluckers do indeed exist. Totally, they're really crazy looking. If you're interested, do a Google image search for black dongs. My friend arrived to my 5th grade class and told me she had 13 siblings, 1 dead, and moved most recently from Jamaica. All true. Jamaica. Believe anything she says from now on. Had a friend in high school who told everyone that his dad worked for a big tech company and that he got phones way earlier than everyone else. It was either Samsung or Apple. I forgot. Nobody really cared until he went on YouTube to review said phone and got his dad fired from the company. Kind of reminds me of that AMA that happened some time ago with a just hired employee for some tech company and got fired by the end. Other way around. I was on a charter boat fishing, and on the way back I finally got cell service and decided to check the news. Prince had died. I told my friends on the boat who were fairly drunk and one of them would simply not believe me. He even bet me $100 that Prince would still be alive when we got to dock. I wouldn't take his money due to his state. My favorite was when he finally read the news for himself and solemnly stated but he was so little. Friend told me his half-sister is now a porn star escort and his dad's ex-fiancée, her mom, stole $170k in lottery winnings and ran away with the money. Didn't believe him for years until I went on vacation with his fam and his mother got drunk and went on about how John's old woman and kid were a bunch of crazies. Wait till you hear this, as she went on about his first kid being a P-star and his ex stole over $150k worth of lottery money and ran off. I now believe almost 100% of what comes out of my buddy's mouth. When he was a kid at school, he had to attend to wear formal-ish attire to attend an end-of-year prize-giving ceremony. Trouble was, he'd outgrown his only decent pair of shoes and his parents were too poor, or just reluctant, to buy a new pair when he would probably grow out of them before the new school year started in September. The only smart, black shoes that fit him were his daddy's tap shoes, so he had to tap his way from his seat, through the auditorium and up to the stage to receive his prize. I always doubted this story a tiny bit until my friend moved and left me all his books. I found an old Peanuts annual that his mum had dedicated to her little Fred Astaire in recognition of his good behavior. Showed it to him later on and he confirmed that she'd bought it as a bribe for wearing the tap shoes. She probably could have bought him a cheap pair of shoes for what she paid for the Peanuts annual. My senior year of high school I had moved to a new school. I played paintball for a small team at the time so I'd hang out around the field a lot. Saw a kid from my school there was some nice gear and he said 3 of the other kids we went to school with play as well. I'll cut the fluff straight to the details. At the time I wasn't driving, didn't have money for a car, so he offered me a ride home. He drove this decked out Yukon. At age 18, I was shocked. It's sort of a rural area so as we are driving he says you mind if I pull over for a top off? I'm thinking WTF is a top off. Maybe he needs to pee. He whips out about an 8-ball and chops a rail down and hoovers it up. That was the first time I'd seen anyone do C or even seen it. Of course he got chatty as we continued to drive. That's when he asked if I wanted the rest. Pretty much a full 8-ball. I declined and asked him, isn't that crap expensive, like why would you just give it to me? All he said was, my mom blows down like Scarface. Trust me, I'm good. A month went by and I went back to his house after practice to smoke a little weed and chill with some of the guys from the field. He nudged me and said, remember what I told you? Do you want any? I denied again and said, WTF do you mean? Show me. He takes me upstairs to his mom's room and I mean there's bricks upon bricks of C. Now their house was big, like 10,000 square featuring, but I'm almost positive the amount of C that was in that room was worth more than the house. Insane. If his mom wouldn't have had to go on the run and they went to this day I'd still think I was hallucinating off some laced weed. As a middle class suburban dude, I had never expected to see that in my life, let alone someone's mother just having bricks laying around the house. Friend told me once that when he was at school assembly someone stole a stall wall from the boys' bathroom and no one was caught. I would question this, but high school students are just like that. My buddy from college used to say he was a hacker and that he broke into several high-profile websites. I was like, sure dude, half the people in CS say that crap. One day we got drunk in his room and I saw him break into some women's college website to replace every employee's photo with Sasha Gray's photo. I also saw his name in the Google App Security Hall of Fame. He was the real deal. Learned a lot of CS from him the next few years. 9/11. Kids in my class were like, someone flew a building into the Twin Towers, and I was like, yeah, sure you Michael Bay level dumbass. 5 minutes later, the principal gets on the PA with an announcement. Plane. Flip side of this, I have a pretty massive Lego collection, a full-sized arcade, custom built, and a ton of video games. I'm pretty much a huge child. I have kids, my youngest is in 1st grade. She tells her friends about all her dad's Legos, the arcade, yada yada. I get home right as my wife shows up with my youngest and her friend. The little friend has this smug look of, I am going to put this lying bee in her place, I can just read it on her. I didn't say anything. Let me youngest and her walk in first just so I can see this little shoot's jaw drop. It was magical. Years ago, 1988, a new guy got hired at my work. Within days he's talking all kinds of crap. One of the biggest tales he told was that his sister had dated Axl Rose. He said that Axl came over all the time and watched movies with his family and just hung out. I called him out about it, and he says he will bring in pics the next day. The next day comes and he says he couldn't find them. We of course were like, sure you can't find them. 4 days later he brings in like 100 pics of himself with Axl and the rest of his family. We never doubted the guy about anything else, lol. We became friends later, so I figured that would count. A friend told me that James Cameron had been working on a film called Avatar for over a decade, and when the technology finally caught up with his vision, it would overtake Titanic at the box office. Basically, this story was one of those urban legends, you know, that everyone knows a friend of a friend of a friend, but you doubt it's actually true. I met the girl who had the hospital records to prove it. She'd had her nipple pierced for a while, when one day, one of the balls that screws on had accidentally unscrewed and fallen off. Stupidly, instead of just taping the piercing in and buying another ball the next day, she pulled the piercing out, and with it came a long white thing. So she cuts it, I don't know why, shoots herself, vomits, blacks out, wakes up in hospital. She cut a nerve, an actual nerve. So yeah, I heard the story from a friend about her friend. Didn't believe it. Met the friend. It's gross. My nipples are pierced, and if could retract my nipples into my body after reading this I would. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.